So I just wanted to do a quick video about Twitter, social media probably in general, but Twitter. And the reason being is because, that's Nandi in the background there, a whole messy office, please excuse the mess. So I was on Twitter today, as I do most days. I just check out various leaders and what they're talking about in relation to China and all of that. And also to post some reminders about Julian Assange to Albanese, who is the Prime Minister of Australia. And so sort of on a fairly regular basis, I'll post something about Julian Assange. You know, what are you doing about Julian Assange? Or some image of something that Stella Morris has posted, or maybe a list of all the different awards that Julian Assange has received. And so it's something I do, you know, since he's been in office, which is about 3 or 4 months now, because Albanese's done nothing to help Julian Assange at all. Not that I would have expected any different. And I've been ringing the Prime Minister's office now since he got into office a few times now, and also before Albanese was Prime Minister. He was the leader of the opposition, and so I would contact his office there and ask what's happening with Julian Assange. And I knew that they would continue to obfuscate and also have no answers, and that continues today. So that's why I post something about Julian Assange, in the hopes that somebody will see it, or that it will shame the government. And it occurred to me when I've gone to look to see if I can see anything that I've posted about Julian Assange. I've noticed that it's either not there, or it's been pushed right to the bottom with the other Julian Assange, you know, in the show more replies section, which nobody can see unless they click on the show more replies. So I've had a look on numerous occasions to see if I can find my post about Julian Assange, and of course I cannot. And other people, and that's Aoife, and he's got his little Bird Be Safe collar on. So anyway, yes, we don't like to dress up our cats. So anyway, there's basically obviously a suppression and shadow banning of anybody mentioning Assange, but the occasional one will come through. And I find that interesting, how sometimes I will see a couple of Assange posts, and they're not necessarily at the bottom of the stack underneath the show more replies. And when I did a post today, and it wasn't about Assange, it was about the government's COVID response, which is very similar to the unhinged Prime Minister we had before Albanese, Scott Morrison, who did a dreadful job with COVID and a whole bunch of other stuff. And he also, there's so many things wrong with him, and I won't go into it here, but it's what one would expect from the LNP party, the opposition major party. But anyway, I posted something today which was about COVID underneath a freshly tweeted thing by Prime Minister Albanese. It was literally only less than 30 seconds old, so I thought this is an excellent opportunity to post something. So he was talking about the economy, and I sort of said things are not going well with on the COVID front, and I put an image of how the COVID deaths before, in 2020, 2021, and now they're literally, 7 times more or 8 times more. You know, there's literally, thousands a month of Australians dying from COVID now. Because the COVID plan is pretty awful, and they basically let it rip, and they're not even sort of putting in sort of a plan to sort of have ongoing vaccinations. You know, seeing that would be required until they find a cure for it. If they find a cure for it, if Big Pharma wants to find a cure, which I doubt they would, because you know they get so much money from vaccinations. But anyway, whatever the case, it's skyrocketed, and the plan, and it's all about the economy. In a neoliberal landscape, it's all about the economy, and people are secondary. So that's why they do things that are in benefit of the economy, and people are starting to wake up to that the public is secondary, really. And that's a good thing that people are waking up to that. COVID has shown that about Australia, about the Australian government, no matter who's in government. But anyway, back to Twitter and the suppression and censorship of content, replies, and anybody challenging, sort of the government on US imperialism or on Julian Assange and that kind of thing. So I had a look to see. I thought I'll use this other account I have on Twitter to check to see if I can see my comment, my reply underneath the freshly tweeted Albanese post about the economy and trying to strengthen the economy. So I exited out of my Faint Signals from Vega account after I'd posted that image of the graph of the increasing COVID deaths, etc. And I went to my other account and I logged in, and then I looked at the same tweet by Albanese, and that was within about 3 or 4 minutes, and I could not see my reply with the image because I also, I had put in some text in there. So, and I've done this on numerous occasions as an experiment, and also I have also just gone back to look to see if I can find anything that I've replied to with Albanese or with Blinken, Secretary Blinken in the US, or Biden, or anybody else that I've challenged their narrative. And I'm polite when I do it, by the way. And most of the time, I'd say most of the time, as in 90% of the time, it's impossible to find my tweet. I go right down to the bottom, and then if I'm lucky, it might be in the Show More Replies section, where you have to click on to see more replies. But most of the time, after I tweet it, I can see it of course, on my Faint Signals from Vega thing, but if I go to my other account, I cannot see it. But this occurred to me as well today, because I sort of thought back to when I could occasionally see Julian Assange, somebody replying with something about Julian Assange, that I might be able to see 2 replies about Julian Assange, but I cannot. There might be a lot more about Julian Assange in these various accounts, replies, and they're being hidden as well. So those people might be feeling the way I do, which is that they think, for a while there I was thinking, wow, there are quite a lot of people in Australia who do care about Julian Assange. They do tweet, they do they go to protests and all that kind of stuff. And I would imagine, because Albanese is in, there could have been, I knew there wouldn't be, but there could have been a better chance of him doing something to address this issue, because he's Labour, and not that means anything, of course. Now it's just a neoliberal party that serves the US the US foreign policy. They're doing as much saber rattling about China as any of the Western countries, and that's to be expected, really. But I've lost my train of thought. But I thought to myself, I might think to myself, well, wow, there's hardly anybody who's really saying anything about Julian Assange. And I remember saying to someone, why on earth aren't there more people using these social media platforms to bring up Julian Assange and shame Albanese on Twitter by bringing up Julian Assange? And then yesterday, after I once again looked to see under various, not just Albanese, but various accounts, looked to see if I can find my replies to their tweets, whomever that may be, and couldn't find them, or if I was lucky, they were way down in the Show More Replies. I thought to myself, this is a great way to demoralize a person into thinking that no one really supports Julian Assange. And it also shows to people who don't know who Julian Assange is, who is Julian Assange, and there's only like a couple of people who are talking about it. He mustn't be very important. It mustn't be an important issue. It's just a couple of, stragglers sort of saying something about this particular person. So I actually, thought to myself, this is a great psyops by, Western imperialist governments, to sort of basically make you think, or make people that aren't aware of an issue even, more importantly, that there is little regard for that particular individual or that particular issue. Like, for example, you rarely see people, occasionally you might see people pushing back on the anti-China propaganda that the Australian government is putting out, but it's not it's not a lot. It's not a lot of pushback. And I don't believe that that's the case, particularly when there are a lot of people that probably don't understand why the government had fairly normal and seemingly healthy relationship with China. Then suddenly, when the US decides to pivot to Asia, things start to take a turn for the worse in our from our government starting to do the saber rattling, and there's absolutely nothing that has occurred between Australia and China relations that should have brought about such animosity toward China. And so the only thing one can deduce, if one is paying attention, and a lot of people don't realize how influential the U.S. national security state is on our foreign policy here in Australia. But a lot of people could think, oh, well, this must be okay because, when they don't see anything much about pushing back against any of this anti-China saber rattling, people think, well, obviously this must be justified, our problems with China. And, it must be because the U.S. has such a problem with them. And then that gets almost into if people have racist opinions about China and that yellow peril kind of stuff and all of the propaganda that's been put out about China bubbling along over decades for intentionally so that they can use that propaganda, that propagandized public when they need to use them, which is right now. If people, there are people that have been propagandized for a very long time here in Australia about Middle Eastern countries, Western Asia, about the U.S. being sort of, what they do is for the good of the world and all this kind of stuff. There are people that still believe that, amazingly. But then, there's so much propaganda. We're absolutely swimming and drowning in propaganda now by corporate media and everything. It's so much worse than it was even a decade ago. So it just occurred to me, now that I'm absolutely sure, and not that I really thought I wasn't, because I could tell just from YouTube how I would comment on something and there'd be zero engagement with my, comments, and then below and above there'd be dozens of people liking somebody who'd said a similar thing to me, where I just said something incredibly simple, even just, thanks for that video, or thanks Abby and Mike if I was watching, something that they'd done, or some other person, just harmless comments. And I'm always polite anyway. So, and that's happened so often now and there's so virtually no engagement with most things I say on YouTube, except on my own account. And sometimes even then, some things that I might post occasionally, occasionally no one will see it. And that I find bizarre, that people subscribe to my own YouTube account don't see, every so often will not see at all a post that I've made. It's usually about Julian Assange or Palestine or something like that. So, I have all the topics that would be considered considered verboten or unpleasant by YouTube, which is owned by Google, which is, just a propaganda arm of the U.S. national security state. I do all the topics that they hate, and it's not surprising that on YouTube now they've just decided to completely, pretty much shadow ban me, make my comments literally invisible. They're not even, you don't even see them way down on the comments list, which initially occasionally you'd see one of my comments way down. I might have just made it, and then I go and I refresh the page and it's way down the bottom, way down. So it's not even about just being pushed way down to the bottom where you never even you have to scroll through hundreds and thousands of comments almost to get to it. It's now just invisible, and that even includes when I think I mentioned on my I think I mentioned in the community section of Faint Signals from Vega that I'd made a comment on a music video that is online that somebody posted of when I was in this band, when I was in my band. And I made a comment using Faint Signals from Vega, and I also made a comment from this other account. And I could not see the 2 lines or 1 line that I made at all from this other account. I couldn't see it at all. So Faint Signals from Vega, even though I was just making a comment from my own account about a music video, it was invisible as well, literally invisible. And there was only 2 comments, mine and someone else's. So, you start to see that it doesn't even matter what I'm talking about. It doesn't matter how harmless it is and completely removed from any political stuff. They've just decided I'm trouble and they've made me pretty much invisible. People that are close to me even have had trouble seeing any of my comments, which usually they allow people that are close to you to see your comments so that you don't wake up to the fact that you're being shadow banned or made invisible or whatever. And, so I think you get the picture that basically this is happening on many social media accounts. And what that means for me is that it's basically like being banned from a town, being basically being banished from the town square where everybody gathers and shares information and stuff, and even banished from the town itself. It's a way of making somebody such a pariah that they are essentially silenced from any sort of social engagement in the town square, all these social media platforms are like the town square. That's why all these social media giants, these Silicon Valley giants, should be public utilities where, they're not just these private businesses. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen because of capitalism. And, it all works in the favor of the government, because the government and these Google and Facebook and all the various ones are just propaganda. They're propaganda arms of the U.S. national security state, Google and all these different other things. So that's how it works. Now, we're propagandized to the hilt, and pretty much I would say I'm one of many people online on the various social media platforms that's been either made completely invisible or censored to such an extent that you have to scroll through thousands of comments to find what they've said. And this is, one reason. That's one of the reasons I deleted my Facebook account, because it was so bad that even the people who were socialist and anti-imperialist, there was about 300 or more people on my private account on Facebook. Pretty much, I'd be lucky if one person would see something that I had posted and would engage with it. And it was only when I would post, say, a photo of one of our cats that maybe I would get a bit more engagement, or it would be, or something, if on the very rare occasion, like for example when my mother died and my brother died within 3 months apart, and I made a comment, I made a short post about that, then I would get engagement. So basically the algorithms scan through your text, they scan the images, and if they think that it's okay to allow engagement, they will. I mean, that is really how it is. It's like what they do with videos on YouTube. The algorithms scan, they can immediately detect if you've got some sort of copyrighted thing, and they will prevent you from posting until you address that. I mean, it's almost instantaneous. They have such good algorithmic scanning now that they can scan through and they can detect all the text that you have. I mean, they can print. It's gotten very good at printing out accurately all the text, it's gotten very good with the audio sort of transcription. So they immediately know when you're talking about Assange or if they hear the word capitalism, or there's a whole list of words now that flag your video and probably make it less and less likely that anybody's going to see it. Palestine and all that kind of stuff. So we've known that for a while. But this whole being completely invisible, and there for a while, I was getting basically any time anybody subscribed to my channel on YouTube, they'd be removed, just sort of knocked off after a few days. So I was being kept at a certain level, and now it's happening again. Now that I haven't been posting very much, and there's been reasons for that, I'm sort of doing more stuff in just locally and in real life, because I haven't really seen, as you can see, the time that I would spend now doing stuff, education stuff online, whether it's veganism is probably a different story, it's not so bad, but other things, anti-imperialist stuff, which I like to do a lot of, that's almost pretty much a waste of time doing that now. I'm sad to say, for me, because of this incredible suppression and censorship that's happening to me. So that's why I've decided to do other projects that I feel might be beneficial and eventually, hopefully, will be beneficial. So that's what's happening, and that's why I very rarely post anything on this channel anymore, which is really sad, because I did want it to be, sort of continue on doing it, and but I don't, and I really appreciate, I've talked about this before, I really appreciate the engagement I have gotten. Unfortunately, it's just such a small few people, and I'm very grateful for those people, but it's like the same small few, like the same 6 or 7 people or something, and I'm really grateful for you people, for these particular people. They're great people, but it's like all these particular people know all about this stuff. They don't need to hear anything from me. Not that I consider myself some an educator or something on imperialist stuff, but I like to give commentary on it. And I'm not saying that I'm not going to do stuff in the future, but I've just kind of, I hit kind of a wall of burnout from just kind of spending a lot of time creating videos and having such small engagement, and from people who could do their own videos probably better than me on this issue, you see. So that's one of the reasons that it slowed down. So mission accomplished with the censorship, because it's actually eventually it won, because, you know, at some point you just kind of go, well, should I be spending my time elsewhere doing things in real time and locally, which might be will be more beneficial, because I'm not being suppressed there. I'm flesh and blood, and I can interact with people, and I can you know, sort of do other things and acting locally. So that's sort of where I'm at the moment. I'm not saying that's a permanent situation, but that's where I am at the moment, and I'm sure that in the future there'll probably be more things for me to comment on. As you can see with the US situation, it's becoming more and more fascistic as during this Biden administration, and by the time 2024 comes around, and if Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis, but it's looking more like Donald Trump now, it will mean that it will be like a critical mass of the overt fascism will just really come to the fore, and it's going to be very scary. And at that point, I might be making more videos on that. I'm not sure. So anyway, so I just wanted to, actually the main reason for this video really was to actually point out something that I think is going on, which I hadn't really thought about before, and that is that I think there are probably a lot more people, say, commenting on Julian Assange, for example, in the Albanese threads, that I cannot see, and they can't see me either. And so we're all in these little sort of kind of prisons underneath these you know, Albanese threads or whomever, Blinken or whatever. And we all think that there's hardly anybody showing any interest in Julian Assange or any pushback about the saber rattling towards China and all that kind of stuff, the support for the proxy war, the US proxy war in Ukraine and all that kind of stuff, you know, that's going on by the government, you know, throwing money, our government's throwing $100 million at this Ukrainian situation. It's just using Ukraine as cannon fodder, basically, because the idea is to weaken Russia and bring down Russia. Well, that's actually not happening, despite the corporate media and what they put out about, the propaganda they put out about all of that. But I think this is another way of demoralizing people, and also people who aren't in the know about all of this, not seeing anything about it, or seeing so little pushback against, say, the saber rattling about China, that they think, well, it must be okay to do this, you know, this, because look at there's hardly anybody saying anything about what's going on, or there's hardly anybody mentioning Julian Assange, so he can't be that important, or maybe he's a bad person, you know, that kind of thing. So I really feel like there's actually probably, if you really looked and you were able to see what was going on behind the scenes with these social media platforms, particularly Twitter at the moment, you would see that there are probably, if you were able to see who's been posting, there's probably a lot more replies there's a lot more comments about Julian Assange, there's probably a lot more comments about China, there's probably a lot more comments about COVID, and so on and so on. COVID's probably the least suppressed, but you would find that there are so many people being suppressed and not being able to see one another's comments, and that to me is just disgusting. It really is, and it just shows how far gone we are. Even in Australia, like so these social media platforms are doing the work for these. They're either, I don't know how complicit you know, sort of the Australian government is with this kind of censorship on political platforms, these politicians' platforms. I'd say they probably are, because Albanese has zero intention of doing anything for Julian Assange. So he doesn't want to be embarrassed on his social media platforms again and again. And I don't believe that there's only I don't believe I and maybe one other person or two other people every so often are saying anything about Julian Assange. I don't believe that for a moment, that I can be one of three people, or, sort of the occasional person that says something. I don't believe that for a minute. So I think this is what's going on. We're just individually being made invisible, and we all think that hardly anybody is saying anything about these things. That's a great way to demoralize the public and also censor the public, but also prevent people who don't know about these issues or Julian Assange or whatever, not ever hearing about it. I mean, it's just disgusting. And this is the level, this is why, for me, I'm kind of basically, I have very little impetus, very little inclination to want to engage on social media anymore, because it is so censored now, to the point where, they've got it so sewn up that you don't have to, they just let the algorithms do their thing. They don't have to worry at all. And if you complain, who cares? Who's gonna do anything? No one's gonna do anything. That's really the sad truth. The only way anything's going to change is when we end this capitalist shit show that's going on, and people become socialist or at least anti-capitalist. And because this is capitalism and imperialism inextricably linked, and Julian Assange is a victim of imperialism and capitalism, because he's interfering with the businesses of the business of the military-industrial complex and all the corporations involved. So, basically you can put it all down to capitalism and imperialism. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. I hope that you're not being invisibilized, if that's a word, as badly as I am. But, this is sort of my experience, and it is very demoralizing, to say the least, and really depressing, because you realize that you've basically been silenced from any sort of engagement in the town square and basically banished. That's really what it boils down to. And that is a very difficult thing, because in the old days, when I'm talking about the old days, I mean like a few centuries ago, if they want in Rome or whatever, or in various, at those times, they used to, when they banished people from the city, that was almost like a death sentence for people, because being banished from society and from human contact was virtually a death sentence. Now, this is not the same, because I'm still able to engage with people around here and stuff, but it's basically such extreme censorship, and it really is like being banished from a town square and from the town, being made invisible when you comment. I think I probably overemphasized the point, which I tend to do, but you get the idea. So anyway, thanks so much for sticking with the channel anyway, despite the lack of content that I've been putting out lately. I'm hoping that I will feel motivated maybe later in the year, or maybe in early next year, to post more. I don't know, but I'm whatever the case, I'm actually doing stuff. It mightn't be online, but I'm working on stuff, and at some point maybe I'll be doing more content. So, but you can always find me posting pretty much every day in the community section, so I hope you check that out. And thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. You're watching Paint Signals for Vega. Till next time, bye for now.